What are some NSFW history facts that don't get taught in school? John F. Kennedy took the virginity of his 19-year-old intern and had her give another guy a BJ poolside. He was kinda a creepy dude in general. He also raped the wife of Ben Bradlee, editor of the Washington Post, on a boat. She repeatedly said no and he did it anyway. If you look up Edward Russell in history books or even Wikipedia, you learn about his military service, including Admiral of the Royal Fleet for some famous battles. What they don't teach is that he threw a party so epic it's still being talked about 300 years later. In 1694, he threw a party for officers, and with 6,000 guests coming, wanted to make it special. So, he made the world's largest cocktail, drained the garden fountain and used that as a giant punch bowl with hundreds of gallons of liquor, over a half-ton of sugar, thousands of lemons, etc. He hired bartenders to paddle around in boats, scoop it up, and serve it to attendees. At some point, it began to rain, so they put a tent up over the fountain to prevent it getting watered down. About a week after they started, they had drank every last drop. The fountain was dry, and the party was over. Damn, must have been one hell of a week. Powdered wigs were invented to cover up head sores caused by syphilis. Syphilis also eventually destroys your nose, which is wild to me. Writing frequently refers to how prominent a person's nose is while expounding on their moral character. Essentially, this guy's super great. He doesn't even have syphilis. Alexander the Great had 361 concubines, official prostitutes. 4 more and he would have won 4 every day of the year. Yeah, but that would be excessive. During the Age of Salem, anytime a large ship would come into port, the men often wouldn't be allowed shore leave for a few days. So you would see small boats packed with prostitutes heading out to the ship at mooring. Larger ships of the line would have over 500 men aboard, so there could definitely be a couple hundred ladies brought aboard behind the captain's back. And with virtually no privacy aboard, you would have spaces in the ship with hundreds of couples going at it at once. There were definitely a lot of captains that didn't allow any women aboard, so the sailors on those ships would just have to wait until they could go ashore. Many children were conceived on the gum deck. Amongst the cannons, they became known as a son of a gun. The father of microbiology, Antony van Leeuwenhoek, was the first to examine semen under a microscope immediately after ejaculating in his wife. Ben Franklin was a super sex freak and loved to tell younger dudes to have sex with old women. There was a Greek general who was supposed to lead a major expedition to Sicily. The night before he left, he got wasted and walked around Athens with his other drunk friends and knocked all of the penises off of the statues in Athens. This caused him to be arrested. He missed the expedition and they lost almost all of the men they sent to Sicily because only he knew the plan well enough to pull it off. Catherine the Great had a parlor room filled with explicit, erotic furniture she commissioned personally. We're talking BJs carved into chairs, an end table where giant big digs torrential cumshots were holding up a marble countertop, a woman getting eaten out by a demon on a throne. Homegirl had taste. She was German and yet she ruled Russia. French President Felix Faure went out via death by BJ from a mistress. Edit. Fixed spelling. If you die while nutting, you are both coming and going. Anne Frank's diary talked a lot about masturbation, but most of it was edited out. Here is an excerpt of such a part of the diary. I didn't realize there was a second set of labia on the inside, since you couldn't see them. What's even funnier is that I thought urine came out of the clitoris when you were standing up. All you see from the front is hair. Between your legs there are 2 soft, cushiony things, also covered with hair, which press together when you are standing, so you can't see what's inside. They separate when you sit down and they are very red and quite fleshy on the inside. In the upper part, between the outer labia, there's a fold of skin that, on second thought, looks like a kind of blister. That's the clitoris. Roman brothels had pictures of the prostitutes' specialties above the door to their room. Will hold you while you cry. President Lyndon Johnson was obsessed with his big dig and loved to show it to people. He called it Jumbo. So President Johnson liked to show people the President's Johnson. The German army was given methamphetamines during their invasion of France, Belgium, Netherlands in 1940. This was the other part of Blitzkrieg that isn't really talked about. For the first 3 days the German army advanced without rest. No stopping or sleeping for 3 days straight. If you got tired they just gave you more meth. The drug may have also played a role in why the Panzer divisions refused to stop even after being ordered to several times by High Command. They only finally stopped advancing when Hitler personally ordered a halt. TLDR, an army of methed up Nazis took down the largest army in Europe in a few weeks. Edit, Netflix has a good documentary series on it now. The first person who was sentenced to the electric chair died horribly. Someone forgot to wet an essential part of the machine and he ended up with bubbling skin, melting eyes and a foaming mouth among other things. The amount of electricity was so strong that he began to convulse violently. So much so that he weakened straps. He twitched so erratically that his index finger dug through the palm of his hand. The entire room smelled of burning flesh. And the stench even permeated some clothes. Many people who came to see had fainted during the execution. But do you know what's even more horrible? They heard him wheezing after they turned the electricity off. Edit, thanks for the gold. Cleopatra was nicknamed Regina Meretrix, the queen of the whores. High class whores though. Not slum prostitutes. There is a distinction in Latin. At the Battle of Agincourt most of the English archers fought pantsless because they had serious diarrhea and were literally sheeting themselves as they fought. They won too. Is that really a win though? Archaeologists find lots of poop. And lots of dildos. How is the poop not completely broken down? It's good sheet. Jenny Wade was a prostitute and a madam. She wasn't a kind and generous soul who was treating the wounded from both sides of the Battle of Gettysburg. She was offering her services to both sides. When you take the bus tour with recorded audio, the storyteller narrating the tour is supposed an old-timer reflecting on the battle. When you pass the Jenny Wade house, still standing, he says something like, "That's the Jenny Wade house. Jenny was a friend of mine. She was a friend to many." I always liked that subtle nod. I wonder if that's where the Krillers got the title for the song Jenny Was a Friend of Mine. Greeks were heavily into sodomy on both sexes. Women were only required to be virgins vaginally prior to marriage. Every other orifice was fair game. In the 12th century a philosopher named Peter Abelard challenged the church teaching on sexual morality, pointing out that no ceremony of man could make an inherently immoral act moral. The act would have to be already generally moral. Therefore sex before marriage really couldn't be considered a mortal sin. He fell in love with the wrong woman and had his nuts cut off. This made him angry and sad. He then wrote a book. 12-year-old Pocahontas used to entertain white colonists with nude cartwheels. This is actually one of the few things we know about her that's indisputable. Early colonizers of the United States used corn cobs as toilet paper. According to Christianity, Jesus ascended to heaven. Hence you might think that, according to Christianity, no body part of him should be found in earth. However, this does not include Jesus's foreskin. As Jesus was, and born as, Jewish, he was circumcised 8 days after birth. Hence, when Jesus, supposedly, ascended to heaven, his foreskin, known as the holy prepuce or the holy foreskin, remained in earth. Throughout the centuries, several churches claimed that they have the original holy foreskin. Even several at the same time. Newton was so dedicated to his work and abhorred fun so much that many people believe he died of ague at 87 years old. And by work I don't mean revolutionizing physics and inventing calculus. I mean alchemy. His main focus was turning lead into gold and making the philosopher's stone. I think Newton is a very good example of someone in history who probably had autism. before autism had the name. 1. The creator of the vibrator was George Taylor. It was originally made as a steam-powered device that was used to cure a disease called masturbation by massaging the pelvic region. 2. Empress Wu Zetian of China asserted her dominance over male officials by making them kneel before her and pleasure her orally. 3. For a long time royal European women gave birth in front of spectators who would pour into the bedchambers to watch the babies arrive. 4. Only one person has been hanged in the USA for committing bestiality. The 16-year-old Thomas Granger was hanged to death for indulging in buggery with a mare, a cow, 2 goats, divers sheep, many sheep, 2 calves, and a turkey as mentioned in the court report from 1642. 5. Nelson Rockefeller, former vice president of USA, suffered a heart attack and died while having sex with his assistant. He was 79. In any history course, the rampant raping done by most occupying forces around the world, for example, Japan in WW2. Pretty much every town, village, city that was invaded from the time of the earliest civilizations. It's been like this. Still happens today. Outside of modern professional fighting forces, raping and looting was always accepted as the best perk of being a soldier. The political smear campaign against Marie Antoinette involved a lot of big digs. Okay. Man. Wow. So the entire life of Julie Daubeny never gets discussed. But it's ducking fascinating. The fact that Lord Byron gets talked about as a player but she doesn't is a damn dirty shame. But the existence of such a woman shows us a lot about the era she lived in. Julie Daubeny was the daughter of the French king's master of the horse, basically. Cavalry commander, managed the royal stables. As such, she was trained in horsemanship and swordsmanship as a child, arts at which she greatly excelled. After she got caught canoodling with a minor and other courtier, her dad married her off to some older minor noble, hoping that would quell the scandal. Well, Julie Daubeny was not one to simply do what good girls do. So, finding marriage with a somewhat nobody kind of dull, she ran off with her boyfriend. They toured France, going from inn to inn, doing singing and exhibition sword fighting shows, riding on horseback to go from place to place. Well, eventually Julie got bored of her man, so she ran off with her girlfriend, the daughter of a nobleman. Now, when he did find out about the affair, this nobleman did what you do with disgraced daughters at the time, shipped her out to a convent and tried to make her forgotten. That is when Julie took matters into her own hands and joined the convent to have hot, illicit, sexy les non six. They left the convent by the only logical route, burning the place down and faking their own death. This, understandably, freaked the lover out a bit, who ran back to her family. The dad had Julie condemned in absentia for kidnapping. Now, remember how I said Julie used to tour France singing? Well, this comes in handy for her now. Because Louis XI, King of France, decides to pardon her and offer her a career at the opera, she'd continue her canoodling ways, having many lovers, both men and women. One evening, she even got in 2-3 duels against noblemen whose wives she had seduced. And even though they attacked her simultaneously, she defeated them all. She died of unknown reasons at age 33. Her gravesite is, to this day, unknown. A life like this, so scandalous, seems unlikely, but is very much the product of the era. The French king of the time was trying to separate himself from church influence. So to have a lady whose lifestyle was so controversial and unacceptable to religious institutions is basically proof that the king was willing to overlook such things if a performer of good caliber could help promote the prestige of his court. Pretty damn cool. And overall a hilarious tale. Napoleon would ask that his wife, Josephine, not bathe for several days when he knew he would be coming home. My man's liked a stinky lady. Capital D. João VI, former king of Portugal, had a royal masturbator Ah yes, the hand of the king. Ancient Greece society was all about butt sex. It gets glossed over or referred to in a passing and vague way. In fact, part of the curriculum of well-off kids, from fancy Athenians to tough Spartans, was being poked from behind by your teacher tutor. Child grooming was more or less systemic, a necessary step in life for most men. So listen, my interest here being purely academic, but Null needs a lot of prep. Even diet if you do it regularly. But Greeks had no modern condoms, pouches or pills for digestion issues. So how exactly did this work out? Queen Victoria instituted a system of certifying prostitutes as syphilis-free. They were called the Queen's Ladies of the Night. Many prostitutes hung the certificate above their beds as a point of pride. That's honestly a very good idea. Reduce transmission. Increase value. Not necessarily NSFW, but pirates were one of the first people to have a healthcare plan of sorts. If you lost an appendage, there was a predetermined pay for everything that was lost or maimed. Also, there was a pretty large number of female pirates. For a time when women had little to no value in the workplace, they more or less had equal treatment and pay to other pirates. The loss of a limb payment is depicted in the Errol Flynn movie, Captain Blood. The one-legged pirate receiving the GB Gold is played by my grandfather. His leg was machine gunned off on the 11th of November 1918. Moved the family to Hollywood and was an extra for many years.